fluorescent lights hummed a familiar tune above the empty aisles of the 24-hour quick-stop mart, their pale glow reflecting off linoleum floors, still damp from the mop Ethan had pushed across them an hour earlier. Outside, the parking lot stretched like a black ocean under the October moon, broken only by the occasional sweep of headlights from the interstate half a mile east. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the store's digital clock blinked the seconds in cherry-red permanence, counting down to nothing in particular. Ethan Riley leaned against the checkout counter, the collar of his navy blue work shirt slightly frayed where his name tag had been re-sewn 3 times. At 24, he wore the rhythms of night shifts like a second skin. The way his eyes adjusted to artificial light, the way midnight coffee tasted both bitter and necessary. His shift always began the same, wiping down the ancient coffee machine that gurgled like a sleeping patient, restocking beef jerky sticks in their dusty rack, and waving to Mrs. Donovan through the glass as she power-walked her schnauzer past the gas pumps at exactly 11:15 p.m. Routine was his anchor, and tonight was no different. The store breathed around him, the refrigerator units shuddering to life, the flicker of a dying bulb above the snack aisle, the faint scent of burnt popcorn clinging to the microwave nobody ever cleaned. He'd memorized these details over 6 months of graveyard shifts, just as he'd memorized the cadence of his nightly visitors. There was Carl, the long-haul trucker, who bought 2 energy drinks and a bag of pretzels every Wednesday, his CB radio crackling static from his rig outside. Officer Ruiz sometimes drifted in around 2 a.m., her patrol car idling under the street lamp as she flipped through magazines she never bought. And then there were the quiet hours, when Ethan would sketch in his tattered notebook, half-formed designs for tattoos he couldn't afford to get inked, landscapes of mountains he'd never seen, while the security cameras watched like unblinking cicadas. Tonight the air carried the first real bite of autumn. Ethan had propped the door open an inch with a cinder block, letting in the smell of wood smoke from distant bonfires. Somewhere beyond the interstate, Maple Creek slept beneath a quilt of orange leaves and porch lights, unaware of the little outpost of light and neon where he stood. The register's scanner beeped cheerfully when he tested it, and he absently straightened the rack of lottery tickets, their edges curled like autumn leaves. At 12:34 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. A draft swept in, carrying the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic. Mrs. Donovan's schnauzer trotted inside alone, its leash trailing behind like a snapped umbilical cord. "Hey, buddy," Ethan frowned, rounding the counter. The dog's tags jingled as it sniffed at the chip display, paws leaving muddy prints on the clean floor. "Where's your mom?" Outside, the parking lot lights buzzed. A plastic bag tumbled across the asphalt, caught in the skeletal branches of a dying oak. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle moaned, though Ethan couldn't remember tracks running through this part of town. The schnauzer looked up at him, whining softly, its eyes reflecting the fluorescence in twin discs of white. Ethan reached for the store phone, its cord coiled in familiar loops. The dial tone echoed like a held breath, and in the frozen foods aisle, unnoticed, a single freezer door crept open with a sigh. The dial tone pulsed in Ethan's ear, sharp and mechanical, as he stared at the muddy paw prints leading back to the propped open door. Mrs. Donovan's schnauzer. "Buddy," she called him, though the name tag on his collar read Sir Reginald, paced tight circles near the snack aisle, leash still dangling. The dog's breathing came in shallow huffs, his nails clicking a nervous rhythm against the linoleum. Ethan's thumb hovered over the phone's keypad. He knew Mrs. Donovan's number by heart. She'd written it on a napkin once, after insisting he call if they ever got low on her brand of menthols. But the digits suddenly felt slippery in his mind, rearranging themselves like Scrabble tiles. "Easy, Reggie," he murmured, more to himself than the dog. Outside, the parking lot stretched undisturbed. No figures in pastel windbreakers power walking through the gloom. No frantic calls echoing across the asphalt. Just the dying oak shuddering in the wind, its branches scratching at the flickering street lamp. Ethan lowered the receiver slowly. The store seemed to hold its breath around him, even the refrigerators pausing their usual chorus of groans. He grabbed a pack of peanut butter dog treats from beneath the counter, the ones Mrs. Donovan always bought, and tore it open with a crinkling snap. Reggie's ears perked up, but he didn't approach. The dog's gaze kept darting toward the propped door, his stubby tail tucked tight. Ethan tossed a treat. It landed with a plink near the magazine rack, rolling to a stop beside a dog-eared copy of Field and Stream. Reggie whined, sniffed the air, but stayed rooted. The freezer door in aisle 3 hissed louder now, a plume of cold mist spilling into the snack aisle. Ethan glanced over, noting the fog creeping across the floor like morning ground cover. He'd have to close that before everything thawed. But first, the dog. He fished out his phone, thumbing through contacts until he found Donovan, Marjorie. The phone rang 6 times before clicking to voicemail. "You've reached Marge. Leave a message, but make it quick. I'm probably walking Reggie." Her voice was all exclamation points and cigarette gravel. Ethan hesitated, then hung up. Maybe she'd taken a fall. Maybe the leash snapped. Maybe a shadow moved beyond the gas pumps. Ethan's head snapped up, heart punching his ribs. But it was just a plastic bag caught in the chain-link fence, flapping like a trapped ghost. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Reggie barked once, a sharp, truncated sound, then fell silent, ears flat. The cold from aisle 3 seeped into Ethan's sneakers as he rounded the counter. He grabbed a flashlight from under the register, for emergencies only, scrawled in his predecessor's sloppy Sharpie, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the mist, revealing the freezer door hanging ajar, its glass fogged over. Inside, the stacks of frozen pizzas and TV dinners sat undisturbed, their cardboard boxes glistening with frost. Ethan reached for the handle, the metal biting through his polyester gloves. A sound stopped him. Not the freezer's hum, but something under it. A wet, rhythmic noise, like a sponge being squeezed. He tilted his head, flashlight beam trembling slightly. The sound seemed to come from deep within the freezer unit, where coils and machinery lurked behind stainless steel panels. "Probably just the compressor," he muttered, more out of habit than conviction. The store answered with a chorus of familiar ticks and groans. When he slammed the freezer shut, the noise stopped dead. Reggie yelped. The dog stood rigid by the entrance, hackles raised, staring at something beyond the threshold. Ethan followed his gaze. The parking lot lay empty, the oak tree's shadow stretching long and skeletal across the asphalt. Then he saw it, a faint smudge of neon pink near the dumpster enclosure. Mrs. Donovan's windbreaker. He was halfway to the door when the store phone rang. The shrill bell made them both jump. Reggie scrambled behind the counter as Ethan lunged for the receiver. "Quick Stop Mart, Ethan speaking." Static fizzed on the line, then a voice. "Yeah, this is Officer Ruiz." You got a Marjorie Donovan there?" Ethan's grip tightened. Through the glass, he watched the pink windbreaker flutter against the dumpster's edge. "No, she's not. Her dog came in alone. I was about to check. Stay inside." Ruiz's tone shifted. The usual midnight small talk replaced by clipped professionalism. A car door slammed through the phone. "We've had reports of disturbances near the rail yard. Lock the doors till I get there. 10 minutes. But her jacket's right outside, I can see." The line went dead. Ethan stood frozen, receiver buzzing in his hand. Reggie pressed against his shins, trembling. Outside, the wind lifted Mrs. Donovan's windbreaker, revealing it wasn't caught on anything at all. The neon fabric lay in a heap, sleeves empty, hood flattened like a shed skin. He moved without thinking. The cinder block scraped concrete as he kicked it aside, door swinging shut with a hydraulic whoosh. Deadbolts engaged with heavy clunks. Reggie's tags jingled as he shadowed Ethan back to the counter, where the security monitor flickered with its 4 grainy quadrants. Registers, coolers, parking lot, aisles. Aisle 3's camera showed nothing but drifting mist. The next 7 minutes passed in a haze of routine, restocking Slim Jims, wiping coffee rings off the counter, straightening the gum display, all while stealing glances at the clock. Ruiz was never late. She'd once timed her breaks to coincide with the fresh pot brewing at 1:15 a.m. sharp. But now, at 1:03 a.m., the parking lot remained still. Reggie settled behind the counter, nose tucked under his tail. Ethan tried Mrs. Donovan's number again, straight to voicemail. He left a message this time, voice straining to sound casual. "Hey, it's Ethan at Quick Stop. Reggie's here. Seems okay. Call me back." The coffee machine chose that moment to gurgle violently, spewing hot water across the counter. Ethan jumped back as brown liquid pooled around the sugar dispensers. He'd refilled it at 11:30, same as always. Same measured scoop, same button pressed. Yet now it overflowed like a clogged gutter, the smell of burnt coffee grounds sharp in his nostrils. As he mopped up the mess, a truck's headlights washed over the store. Carl's rig rumbled into the lot, its familiar eat, sleep, repeat. Mud flaps caked with October grime. Relief flooded Ethan's chest until he saw Carl wasn't alone. A figure sat shotgun. Carl never had passengers. The trucker lumbered in at 1:17 a.m., leaving his companion in the idling rig. Ethan noted the mud splattering Carl's boots, unusual for a man who took pride in buffing his soles, clean at every rest stop. 2 Red Bulls and... Carl's voice trailed off as he noticed Reggie. His handlebar mustache twitched. "Since when you run a kennel?" Mrs. Donovan's dog came in alone. Ethan rang up the energy drinks, eyeing the rig outside. The passenger sat perfectly still, backlit by dashboard lights. "Who's your friend?" Carl followed his gaze, then chuckled. A dry, papery sound. Some hitchhiker couple miles back. Didn't say a word since picking him up. He tossed a bag of pretzels on the counter. "Quiet type." The words hung in the air. Reggie growled low in his throat, a sound Ethan had never heard from the typically docile schnauzer. Outside, the rig's passenger turned their head slowly toward the store. All Ethan could make out was a pale oval face and dark matted hair. Carl didn't seem to notice. He slapped a 5 on the counter. "Keep the change. Watch yourself tonight. CB's been buzzing about some nut job on the roads. Cops'll probably..." His words dissolved into static as the store lights flickered. Just once. Just long enough for Ethan to miss whatever came next. When the fluorescence steadied, Carl was already at the door, pretzels tucked under his arm. "Stay sharp, kid." The rig's engine roared to life. As it pulled away, Ethan caught a glimpse of the passenger's window rolling up, too slow, too deliberate, before taillights vanished toward the interstate. Alone again, Ethan checked the security monitor. The frozen foods aisle sat quiet, mist dissipated. But in the parking lot quadrant, something glinted near Mrs. Donovan's abandoned windbreaker. He zoomed in, pixelated image blurring. A pair of writing glasses. One lens cracked. Mrs. Donovan's signature cat-eye frames. Reggie began to whine again, louder now, pacing between the counter and the stockroom door. The smell of burnt coffee returned, though the machine sat cold and empty. And beneath it all, faint but persistent, came that wet sponge-like sound, not from the freezer this time, but somewhere deeper in the store, somewhere behind the employees-only door. Ethan reached under the counter, fingers closing around the baseball bat they kept for rowdy customers. The vinyl grip felt foreign in his palm. Reggie's whines escalated to sharp barks as Ethan approached the stockroom, bat raised, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The door creaked open, and the store phone began to ring. The stockroom door swung inward with a whine of neglected hinges. Flashlight beam slicing through dust motes that swirled like agitated fireflies. Ethan's sneakers squeaked against the concrete floor, the bat trembling in his grip. Reggie pressed against his leg, a low growl rumbling through the dog's ribs, as if tuned to some frequency Ethan couldn't hear. The stockroom stretched deeper than the light could reach, a labyrinth of metal shelves stacked with off-brand paper towels and motor oil. The air tasted stale, laced with the tang of leaking detergent bottles. Ethan's beam caught the emergency exit sign at the far wall, its red letters buzzing faintly. Beneath it, something glistened. Water. A dark puddle spread from beneath the cracked emergency door, its surface rippling with each draft. Ethan's shoulders relaxed incrementally. Just a leak, probably from the thunderstorm that had rolled through 3 days prior. But as he stepped closer, the beam revealed the liquid's odd viscosity, too iridescent for water, catching the light like spilled gasoline. Reggie sniffed at the edge, then recoiled with a sneeze. The store phone's ringing cut off abruptly. In the sudden silence, Ethan noticed the stockroom's soundscape, the drip from a corroded pipe harmonizing with the wet squelch he'd heard earlier. It came from the northeast corner, behind a tower of cereal boxes. He rounded the shelves, bat raised, and found the source. A janitor's mop bucket overturned, its murky contents seeping into a cardboard box of discount beef jerky. The mop head lay several feet away, strands splayed like dead fingers. "Damn raccoons," Ethan muttered, nudging the mop with his foot. The store's wildlife problem was legendary. Last month, they'd found a family of possums nesting in the tampon display. But the explanation rang hollow as he noticed the bucket's position. It had been wedged securely between two shelves. No raccoon could have knocked it loose. Reggie's growl intensified. The dog backed toward the exit, tail between legs, eyes fixed on the emergency door. Through its fogged window, the parking lot's sodium lights cast elongated rectangles across the floor. One of them flickered, then two. A shadow passed, too tall for Mrs. Donovan, too fluid for Carl's hitchhiker. Ethan froze, flashlight beam darting to the door. The shadow dissolved before he could fix on it, leaving only the swaying branches of the dying oak beyond the fence. His throat tightened. The emergency door's handle hung slightly askew, its metal dented inward, as if someone had thrown their weight against it from outside. The fluorescents buzzed back to life as Ethan retreated to the main store, Reggie scrambling ahead. The security monitor showed 4 quiet quadrants, though the timestamp glitched. 1:23 a.m. flickering to 1:17 and back. Ethan thumped the CRT screen with his palm, an old trick that usually stabilized the feed. This time, static snowed across the parking lot camera. He was pouring Reggie a bowl of water from the bottled stock when the coffee machine erupted again. A geyser of black liquid shot from the brewer, splattering the world's okayest employee mug Ethan kept by the register. The machine's display flashed error in staccato red bursts, though its power cord lay unplugged on the counter. The smell hit him first. Not coffee, but something earthy and decay-adjacent, like turned soil after heavy rain. Reggie backed away, knocking over the water bowl. "Easy, easy," Ethan soothed, reaching for paper towels. His hand froze mid-air. The liquid pooling across the counter wasn't merely dark. It moved with purpose, beating into perfect spheres that rolled against gravity toward the edge. One droplet hung suspended from the counter's lip, elongating into a teardrop shape before plopping to the floor. A truck's horn blared outside, jolting him back to reality. Through the security grate, Ethan saw a semi roaring past on the interstate, its trailer lights bleeding red across the mist. Normalcy reasserted itself. The coffee puddle now sat stagnant, ordinary. He mopped it up with trembling hands, tossing the sodden towels into a bin already overflowing from earlier. The digital clock read 1:34 a.m. when the first freezer door popped open. Not aisle 3 this time, but aisle 7, the ice cream section. Ethan heard the distinctive click hiss from across the store, followed by the tinny jingle of a commercial ice cream truck song. His head snapped up. The melody warped, notes dragging like a warped record, as cold, white vapor crept across the ceiling tiles. Reggie went berserk. The schnauzer launched into a barking fit, racing between freezer aisles and the entrance, claws scrabbling for purchase. Ethan lunged to catch his trailing leash, but the dog darted behind the hot dog roller grill. "Reggie, goddammit!" The ice cream freezer's music cut off mid-note. When Ethan rounded the corner, leash in hand, he found the freezer door wide open. Neapolitan cartons sat perfectly aligned, their pink-brown-white layers gleaming under the flickering light. But the frost patterns on the glass told a different story. Swirls and arcs that looked disturbingly like fingerprints, if fingers had too many joints. Reggie quieted abruptly, crouching beneath a rack of sun-faded tabloids. His whine became a continuous, high-pitched keen. Ethan slammed the freezer shut, the glass rattling in its frame. Through it, he glimpsed movement, not his reflection, but something shifting in the aisle behind him. He spun, bat raised. A single bag of Doritos lay in the center of the aisle, though he'd faced the chip rack moments earlier. The bag's silver packaging caught the light as it twitched. Once, twice. Ethan approached cautiously, bat poised. It was full of crickets, dozens of them alive and clambering over each other, their bodies clicking against the foil interior. As Ethan stared, one pushed through a seam in the packaging, antennae waving. Reggie's whining crescendoed. The bag convulsed, more insects escaping through self-made holes, their chirps merging into a discordant symphony. The overhead lights chose that moment to fail. Not the dramatic plunge into darkness of horror films, but a slow fade, fluorescence dimming to 50%, then 30%, bathing the store in murky twilight. Emergency exit signs glowed blood red. Reggie's collar jingled as he retreated behind Ethan's legs. The crickets fell silent. Ethan's breath fogged in the sudden chill. He fumbled for the flashlight, clicking it on just as the PA system crackled to life. No voice came through, just white noise that resolved after several seconds into the sound of steady breathing. In, out, syncopated with his own. He found the breaker box behind the counter, flipping switches with numb fingers. Lights surged back, harsh and sudden. The PA cut off. The crickets were gone. Not a single exoskeleton remained, though the torn Doritos bag still lay deflated on the floor. Officer Ruiz arrived at 2:06 a.m. Her patrol car pulled in with none of its usual ceremony. Lights dark. Ruiz looked smaller without her utility belt, her uniform jacket replaced by a faded college sweatshirt. Ethan noted the absence of her duty weapon first, then the tremor in her hands as she accepted the coffee he offered. Black, 2 sugars in a foam cup. "We've got search teams out," she said, avoiding eye contact with Reggie. The dog sat unnaturally still by the lottery machine, gaze fixed on Ruiz's left ear. Marge's husband reported her missing an hour ago. Last seen walking. She gestured weakly at the schnauzer. Ethan nodded toward the dumpster enclosure. "Are windbreakers out there? And glasses?" Ruiz stiffened. "Don't touch anything. CSU's en route." She sipped her coffee, grimaced, and set it aside. "You see anyone else tonight? Strangers? Vehicles?" The hitchhiker's pale face flashed in Ethan's mind. "Carl picked up a passenger. Left maybe 40 minutes ago." "Carl who?" "The trucker. Regular. You've seen him. Big guy with a handlebar mustache." Ruiz finished, pulling out her notepad. "What did the passenger look like?" Ethan opened his mouth, then paused. The details slipped like smoke. Height indeterminate, features blurred, only that unsettling stillness remaining. "Couldn't tell. Sat in the dark." Ruiz scribbled something, her pen digging into the paper. "And the freezer incidents? Just malfunctions. The doors keep popping." Even as he said it, the ice cream freezer's warped jingle echoed in his memory. She asked more questions in that detached cop voice, but Ethan's attention fractured. Behind Ruiz, the security monitor flickered. In the parking lot quadrant, pixelated figures moved. Too many, too small. Children. Their forms blurred as they circled the abandoned windbreaker, holding hands in a ring around the rosy loop that never ended. Ruiz snapped her notepad shut. "Stay vigilant. We'll have units patrolling." As her taillights disappeared down the access road, Ethan noticed her untouched coffee cup. The liquid inside had separated into distinct layers, oil slick swirls floating atop black. When he went to toss it, the foam disintegrated in his grip, leaving only a fine gray powder that smelled of burnt hair. Reggie stared at the dumpster enclosure, growling. The wind had died. Mrs. Donovan's windbreaker lay perfectly centered in a pool of street lamp light, sleeves arranged at 10 and 2 positions like a clock. As Ethan watched, the right sleeve twitched, a spasm too deliberate to be the breeze. Inside the store, the lotto ticket printer whirred to life. It spat out a single ticket, scorched along the edges, with today's date and a string of numbers that matched Ethan's birth year, his apartment number, and the time Reggie had entered the store. The words, "Claim your prize," shimmered wetly under the light, ink bleeding into the paper. Ethan dropped it into the drawer beneath a stack of unpaid invoices. His hands smelled of copper. At 3:33 a.m., The phones began to ring in unison. Storeline, his cell, even the disconnected payphone outside. Their tones overlapped in a dissonant chorus that made Reggie howl. Ethan stood amidst the cacophony, bat in hand, staring at the emergency door's dented handle. It turned, slowly, methodically, then stopped. The handle stopped turning. Ethan's breath crystallized in the air, each exhale a miniature storm cloud. Reggie's growl deepened into something primal, the sound vibrating through the linoleum as the emergency door's hinges let out a metallic scream. It wasn't a person that stepped through. The figure unfolded itself like origami in reverse, joints bending where they shouldn't, limbs elongating to brush the ceiling tiles. Its silhouette shimmered at the edges, as if reality itself struggled to contain it. The smell hit Ethan first, wet soil and burnt coffee grounds, undercut by something sweetly rotten, like fruit left to ferment in a sealed jar. Reggie launched forward, a streak of fury, teeth snapping at air as the thing twisted sideways, avoiding the attack with impossible fluidity. Reggie, no. The schnauzer's leash went taut as the creature's hand, if it could be called a hand, shot out. 5 fingers branched into 10, then 20, fibrous tendrils sprouting from each digit like fungal filaments. They wrapped around Reggie's midsection, lifting him effortlessly. The dog yelped, a sound that tore through Ethan's chest as he swung the bat. It passed through the creature's torso like striking smoke. The thing turned its head. Not a face, but a negative space where light bent inward, forming a vortex of shadows. Ethan's reflection warped in its face. His features stretched and melted like Dally's clock. The tendrils retracted, depositing Reggie gently, too gently, behind a display of energy drinks. The dog cowered, unharmed but trembling violently. The fluorescence began to pulse. With each dim cycle, the creature advanced. Ethan backpedaled, bat raised uselessly, until his spine hit the lottery ticket machine. Cold seeped through his shirt as the thing leaned in, that void-like face inches from his own. A sound emanated from it, not a voice, but the collective noise of every freezer door creaking open at once, layered with the wet squelch from the stockroom floor. Ethan. It spoke in Mrs. Donovan's cigarette rasp. His legs gave out. The bat clattered to the floor as he slid down the machine, staring up at the shifting mass of shadows. The emergency exit sign's red glow haloed its head, casting long fingers across the ceiling. Reggie whimpered somewhere to his left, but Ethan couldn't look away. The void face rippled, fragments of familiar images flashing within it. Mrs. Donovan's cracked glasses sinking into black mud, Carl's rig careening off a rain-slicked road, Officer Ruiz's patrol car idling outside an abandoned rail yard. The creature reached for him. Its touch wasn't cold, but absent. A vacuum where warmth should be. Ethan's arm went numb where the tendrils brushed his skin, the sensations spreading like reverse frostbite. He gasped, scrabbling sideways, fingers finding the edge of the coffee spill from hours earlier. The liquid had congealed into tar-like strands that stuck to his palm. A high-pitched whine cut through the air, the security monitors overloading. Glass shattered as screens erupted in pixelated static, the creature flinching at the noise. Ethan seized the distraction, lunging for the counter where the store phone rang incessantly. His numb fingers fumbled with the cordless receiver. "Help, I'm at Quickstep." The creature's tendrils wrapped around his ankles. Ethan crashed to the floor, phone skittering under a shelf as the thing dragged him backward. Linoleum burned his elbows as he clawed for purchase, freehand knocking over a pyramid of soup cans. They rolled like tumbleweeds, one cracking open to spill chicken noodle broth across the creature's path. It hissed, the first truly organic sound it had made, retracting from the liquid. Ethan scrambled upright, brain connecting dots. He vaulted over the counter, nearly tripping on Reggie, and grabbed the entire coffee pot. 3-day-old sludge sloshed inside, reeking of mold. The creature loomed at the counter's edge, tendrils probing the formica surface. Ethan hurled the pot. Glass shattered. Black liquid splattered across the thing's chest, smoking where it made contact. The creature staggered, an impossible movement, like film frame skipping, as the broth and coffee formed a sticky barrier between them. Its void face contorted, Mrs. Donovan's voice shredding into static. Reggie barked sharply near the stockroom. Ethan followed, legs jelly, as the dog darted through the employee's only door. He slammed it behind them, flipping the deadbolt, just as tendrils slammed against the reinforced steel. The stockroom's single bulb swung wildly, casting strobe-like shadows. Ethan's numbed arm hung limp, fingertips tingling with pins and needles. Reggie pawed at a grate in the floor. The old coal chute sealed decades ago, its edges rusted shut. The banging intensified behind them, denting the steel door inward. Something clattered down from the shelves. A box of plastic straws bursting open, white tubes scattering like bones. Ethan gripped the grate with his functional hand, tendons standing out as he pulled. Rust flaked away, the metal screaming in protest. Cold air rushed up from the darkness below, carrying the scent of damp limestone and diesel. The door's hinges tore loose with a metallic shriek. Ethan didn't look back. He shoved Reggie into the chute, the dog's claws scrabbling against metal as he slid into darkness. Ethan followed feet first, the creature's tendrils snagging his shoelace as he dropped. They fell for too long. The chute swallowed them whole, its rusted walls scraping against Ethan's shoulders as he plummeted into blackness. Reggie's yelps echoed upward, swallowed by the creature's guttural roar from above. They landed not with a crash, but a sickening squelch, ankle-deep in viscous fluid that clung to their legs like tar. Ethan's flashlight flickered to life, revealing walls pulsating with bioluminescent fungi, their blue-green glow illuminating what looked less like a tunnel and more like the gullet of some enormous beast. The air hung thick with the smell of spoiled milk and iron. Reggie shook himself violently, spraying black droplets that sizzled where they hit the walls. Above them, the chute's entrance had sealed over with a web of fibrous tendrils, the same fungal growths now creeping across the tunnel floor. Ethan's numb arm brushed against a tendril. It recoiled with a wet pop, leaving blisters on his skin. "This way," he whispered, though he had no concept of direction. The tunnel branched endlessly, its walls lined with objects that shouldn't exist underground. A shopping cart fused to the stone, its wheels still spinning lazily. A cluster of Quick-Stop Mart coffee mugs growing from the ceiling like stalactites, dripping oily liquid. Reggie sniffed at a half-buried gas pump handle protruding from the wall, whining when it crumbled to rust at his touch. The creature found them at the first intersection. It oozed from the ceiling, its form liquefying and reforming, a dripping chandelier of flesh and shadow. Mrs. Donovan's cracked glasses materialized within its mass, suspended like insects in amber. Ethan swung the flashlight beam like a weapon, the light causing its surface to bubble and peel. It recoiled, emitting a sound that was part steam valve hiss, part human sob. "Light hurts it," Ethan breathed, backing away. Reggie lunged at a tendril, sneaking toward their feet, his teeth closing on something solid within the smoke-like flesh. The creature shrieked, a choir of familiar voices. Carl's booming laugh twisted into a scream. Officer Ruiz's cop jargon warped to nonsense syllables. They ran. The tunnels conspired against them. Floor tiles from the Quick Stop's snack aisle appeared underfoot, only to crumble into ash. A freezer door materialized in their path, swinging open to release a blizzard of expired coupons that cut like paper shuriken. Ethan shielded his face, feeling warm blood trickle down his neck as they stumbled into a cavernous space, the heart of the labyrinth. It was a perfect replica of the Quick Stop Mart. Aisles stretched into darkness, shelves stocked with distorted versions of familiar products. Beef jerky packages squirmed with maggots, energy drinks bubbled with viscous black fluid. The digital clock above mocked them, 3:33 a.m. frozen in bleeding numerals. Behind counter number 3, a shadowy figure mopped the floor with something that wasn't water. Reggie's growl turned to a terrified whine. The creature reformed behind the register, its tendrils weaving through lottery ticket rolls like thread through a sewing machine. It spoke with the store's PA system now, every word vibrating Ethan's molars. "Your shift isn't over." Ethan's legs moved on autopilot. He grabbed a lighter from the distorted cigarette display, igniting an aerosol can of cheese-flavored chip dust. The makeshift flamethrower sent a spiral of orange fire across the creature's mass. It screamed in a dozen voices. The night shift workers who'd come before him, their memories digested into this thing's DNA. The fire revealed the horror's true shape, not a single entity, but a colony. Hundreds of translucent, worm-like creatures writhed within the smoke, each bearing the face of someone the Quick Stop had consumed. Mrs. Donovan's features surfaced briefly, mouth stretched in a silent scream, before dissolving into the swarm. Reggie herded Ethan toward the stockroom door, or this nightmare's version of it. The creature regrouped faster now, tendrils knitting together with audible snaps. They burst through the door into a landscape that defied physics. The stockroom stretched vertically into infinity, shelves spiraling upward like a DNA helix. A river of black liquid cascaded from above, carrying shredded employee uniforms and name tags. Ethan recognized from the break room's wall of former staff. The creature flowed in after them, its form adapting to the new geometry. Walls became floors, gravity shifting as it gave chase. Ethan's boots slipped on a waterfall of expired mayonnaise jars, their contents squirming with pale larvae. He caught Reggie mid-fall, the dog's teeth sinking into his forearm in blind panic. There, a glint of steel, the emergency exit door, impossibly wedged between two shelves 3 stories above. Its red sign flickered weakly. Ethan scrambled up a shelving unit that bent like rubber, inventory boxes melting at his touch. The creature rematerialized ahead, tendrils forming a living barrier. Ethan did the only thing left. He ripped open a case of bottled water, the cheap generic brand he'd stocked himself just hours before, and began hurling them. The first bottle passed harmlessly through, but the second struck a cluster of worm creatures mid-transformation. They burst like overripe grapes, spraying acidic fluid that ate through the shelf beneath them. A strategy formed. Reggie, the liquids. He smashed a bottle against the shelving, creating a makeshift moat. The creature hesitated, its edges fraying where water touched. Ethan tore through the surreal inventory, pickle brine, windshield fluid, leaking batteries, creating a toxic barrier. The creature recoiled, its mass contracting as it fought to maintain cohesion. They reached the emergency door. Its handle burned with cold, frost spreading across Ethan's palm as he turned. Behind them, the creature compressed itself into a humanoid shape, a funhouse mirror version of Ethan himself, down to the frayed collar and name tag. "Stay." It spoke with his voice but warped, as if played through broken speakers. "We'll wear you well." Ethan kicked the door open. Daylight, real, golden, morning light, blinded them. The creature howled, its stolen faces blistering in the sun. Reggie leaped through first, dragging Ethan by his belt loop as tendrils snagged his ankles. They fell again, not into darkness, but onto the cracked asphalt of the quick-stop parking lot. Dawn painted the sky in peach and lavender hues. The store stood intact behind them, its neon sign dark. Ethan rolled onto his back, expecting to see the creature boiling from the doorway. Nothing emerged. Reggie licked his face frantically. The parking lot held an eerie stillness. No bird song, no interstate noise, just the faint drip of liquid from Ethan's clothes. He sat up, trembling, to examine the store. Every window wept black tears. The dawn light did nothing to warm the Quick Stop's parking lot. Ethan knelt on asphalt that felt spongy beneath his knees, each crack in the pavement oozing threads of the same black substance weeping from the store's windows. Reggie pressed against his side, the dog's matted fur reeking of mildew and burnt plastic. Across the lot, the neon sign flickered once, a dying gasp, before going dark. But the silence that followed wasn't empty. It buzzed. Ethan's numb arm hung useless, fingertips brushing a puddle that reflected the sky in greasy rainbows. The reflection wavered, then inverted. The creature rose from the blackened water, not the shifting horror from the tunnels, but something distilled, a humanoid figure carved from hardened tar, its surface studded with quick-stop detritus. Mrs. Donovan's cat-eye glasses embedded in its chest like a brooch, shreds of Carl's flannel shirt woven into its limbs, Officer Ruiz's badge glinting where a face should have been. It moved with jerky precision, as if learning to puppet this new form, each step leaving molten footprints that hissed against the asphalt. Reggie's growl vibrated through Ethan's ribs. He staggered upright, scanning the lot. His Honda Civic sat 20 feet away, driver's door ajar from his last shift. The car listed to one side, tires melted into puddles of bubbling rubber. Useless. The creature raised a hand. Across the lot, the gas pumps creaked to life. Ethan barely yanked Reggie back as the first nozzle erupted, unleashing a geyser of black fuel that rained down in sticky strands. The smell was nauseatingly sweet, like cotton candy dipped in motor oil. The creature gestured again, and the dumpster near the store's entrance toppled with a metallic scream, disgorging mountains of writhing garbage, maggot-ridden food waste, shredded employee uniforms, 1,000 crumpled lottery tickets that fluttered like wounded moths. "The road," Ethan wheezed, dragging Reggie toward the access lane. The interstate's distant hum promised civilization, sanity, but the pavement buckled as they ran, asphalt splitting to reveal pulsating tunnels below, glimpses of the labyrinth still churning beneath their feet. The creature kept pace. It wasn't running. It unfolded, sections of its tar body stretching across the lot, like taffy, Officer Ruiz's badge now hovering inches from Ethan's face. The metal surface reflected not his own terrified expression, but Mrs. Donovan's, mouth stretched in a silent scream, eyes wide with decades-old terror. Reggie lunged, teeth closing on the badge. The creature recoiled, ripping the dog sideways. Ethan caught Reggie's leash, the nylon burning through his palm as he pulled. The badge clattered to the ground, taking a chunk of the creature's flesh with it. The exposed cavity writhed with those translucent worms, each sporting Ethan's own exhausted eyes. They reached the highway embankment. Thick fog rolled off the interstate, reducing the occasional semi-truck to faint yellow ghosts. Ethan's hopes lifted until the first rig passed through them, its engine silent, trailer dissolving like smoke. "It's not real," he whispered. The creature had them trapped in a bubble of its own making, the real world reduced to a mirage. Behind them, the Quick Stop's roof peeled open like a tin can. Ribbons of steel curled skyward, revealing the store's insides. A pulsing heart of darkness swollen with trapped souls. Faces pressed against the spectral walls, mouths moving in unison. The PA system crackled to life, broadcasting their pleas in a layered chorus. "Clock out, clock out, clock out." The creature surged forward, its tar body shedding debris. Ethan stumbled back, foot sinking into the embankment's soft soil. His fingers closed around cold metal, a discarded tire iron, half buried in mud. He swung blindly, the tool passing through the creature's chest, but striking something solid at its core. A coffee pot. The same cracked carafe from the store's break room, now filled with a swirling black liquid. The creature spasmed, worms spilling from the impact site. Ethan swung again, aiming for the pot. Clang. The glass held. The creature's tar body engulfed the tire iron, yanking it from Ethan's grip. He fell backward, skidding down the embankment into a drainage ditch, choked with dead leaves. Reggie tumbled after him, yelping as his leash snagged on a root. Above, the creature loomed at the ditch's edge. It began to seep downward, tar thickening into 100 skeletal hands that clawed at the mud. Ethan scrambled backward, shoulders hitting a corroded grate. Through its rusted bars, he glimpsed movement. Water. No. A reflection. The drainage tunnel's shallow stream mirrored the parking lot above. But in this inverted world, the creature didn't exist. Ethan saw only the real sky, clear blue, a hawk circling, and the distant glint of Officer Ruiz's patrol car speeding toward the quick stop. "The water," he gasped. Dragging Reggie into the tunnel, he plunged them both into the icy stream. The creature's hands recoiled, dissolving where the water touched. But the relief was short-lived. The tunnel shuddered, walls cracking as the creature's tendrils burrowed underground to flank them. Ethan ran, sneakers slipping on mossy stones. The tunnel curved, daylight ahead. He could see the real interstate now, a tanker truck rumbling past. Salvation. Reggie's leash snapped. The dog skidded to a halt, barking furiously at the tunnel wall. Ethan turned, and the breath left his lungs. The creature had rebuilt itself, using the tunnel's filth. Rotting leaves, dead insects, the bones of stray animals. Officer Ruiz's badge now dangled from a ribcage of PVC pipes, her voice echoing through the hollow chambers. "You should have stayed inside, Ethan." It lunged. Ethan dove, rolling onto the highway shoulder as the creature's claws grazed his ankle. Tires screeched. The tanker truck swerved, horn blaring, and for one heart-stopping moment, Ethan thought it would crush them. But the truck passed through the creature like a knife through smoke. The creature reformed, laughing with Carl's voice. "They can't see us, kid. We're on the night shift forever." Ethan's hand closed around a handful of roadside gravel. He threw it, not at the creature, but at the tanker's rear lights. The stones clattered against its bumper, real, solid. The driver braked. Ethan didn't hesitate. He scooped up Reggie and sprinted, legs burning, as the tanker's air brakes hissed. The creature howled, its form destabilizing as it gave chase. Ethan could see the driver's face now, a bearded man leaning out, shouting words drowned by the creature's roar. 10 feet. The creature's claws hooked Ethan's collar. 5 feet. Reggie leaped from his arms into the truck's open window. 2 feet. Ethan slammed against the tanker's side, fingers scrabbling for a grip. The creature's weight dragged him downward, tar body spreading across the metal like a stain. The driver grabbed his wrist, hauling as the truck accelerated. "Let go, you son of a..." The driver's words cut off as he made eye contact with the creature. His pupils dilated, face going slack. Ethan felt the man's grip loosen. Hypnotized. Summoning his last strength, Ethan kicked backward. His sneaker connected with the coffee pot, still embedded in the creature's core. Glass shattered. The creature came apart in a wave of sludge and screaming worms. Ethan hauled himself into the truck, collapsing beside Reggie as the tanker merged onto the interstate. Through the rear window, the quick stop shrank into the distance, its roof still peeled open like a grotesque flower. But in the side mirror, the creature's remains twitched. Worms wriggled into the highway's cracks, converging. The tanker truck's cab reeked of stale cigarettes and regret. Ethan slumped against the passenger door, Reggie's weight a welcome anchor on his lap. The driver, Mac, according to the peeling decal on the dashboard, kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Neither spoke. The radio played static. They exited the interstate at a nameless town, its water tower bleeding rust down the letters. Home of the 2008 state champion, Lehman's. Mac pulled into a truck stop diner that might have been charming in 1978. Now its neon coffee cup buzzed like a dying wasp. "You want?" Mac began, then froze. His eyes locked onto the diner's restroom door, where a janitor's mop bucket sat overflowing with black water. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed Reggie and stumbled into the parking lot, the midday sun too bright, too clean. A payphone stood near the diesel pumps. He fetted quarters with trembling hands, dialing the only number muscle memory could conjure. "You've reached Marjorie Donovan. Leave a message, but make it quick. I'm probably walking Reggie." The beep startled him. "Mrs. Donovan, it's Ethan, from the quick stop. I've got Reggie. He's safe. Call me at..." He rattled off Mac's CB radio frequency, not knowing why. The receiver slipped from his grip, swinging on its cord like a pendulum. Reggie sniffed a grease stain, tail tentative. Normal dog things. Ethan envied him. They hitched rides in stages, a produce truck with crates of overripe peaches, a church van smelling of sacramental wine. Finally, a state trooper who didn't ask why a gas station clerk and a schnauzer reeked of sewer water. The patrol car's computer flickered with bulletins. Ethan caught the words, "Quick Stop Mart and Arson Investigation." Before the trooper snapped the screen shut, Maple Creek welcomed them with false normalcy. Kids rode bikes down streets canopied in red and gold, their laughter sharp as knife blades. Ethan's apartment building leaned slightly, its brick facade swallowing the afternoon light. Mrs. Kowalski from 3B watered her window boxes, chrysanthemums bending away from the spray. "There you are." Mrs. Donovan's voice shouldn't have made him flinch. She emerged from the building's shadow, cigarette trailing a serpentine smoke curl. Her power-walking outfit, neon pink windbreaker, reflective stripes, looked freshly laundered. No mud stains, no tears. Reggie strained at the leash, whining. "Oh, my brave boy." She scooped him up, nuzzling his head. Ethan noted how the dog's tail didn't wag. "I've been worried sick. The police said the store burned down, and when I couldn't find Reggie, where were you?" Ethan's voice came out cracked. "That night." She blinked, mascara clumping. "Walk-in Reggie, same as always. Must have dropped his leash near the rail yard. These arthritic hands, you know." She held them up. The left lacked its usual wedding band. Ethan stepped back. The sun dipped behind clouds, casting her face in monochrome. "You should come up," she said too brightly. "I made meatloaf." He declined. His apartment smelled of mildew and absence. The answering machine blinked. 7 messages from the Quick Stop's corporate office, each more strained than the last. Ethan ejected the tape, threw it out the window. Below, a stray dog trotted past, its coat patchy. In the shower, he scrubbed until his skin burned. The bathroom mirror fogged over except for one clear patch, a handprint too large to be his own. He slept with the lights on. Morning brought a certified letter. Termination of employment. Attached photos showed the Quick Stop's carcass, melted shelving, freezer units burst open like seed pods. The insurance adjuster's report cited faulty wiring. Ethan's eyes lingered on a close-up of the parking lot asphalt. The black stains had been power washed away. He took the long walk to the police station. Officer Ruiz's desk sat empty, her nameplate missing. The duty sergeant chewed Nicorette with military precision. "Transferred," he said. "Sudden family thing." "Did she ever?" Ethan swallowed. "Mention anything? About the store?" The sergeant's jaw stilled. "You here to file a report, son?" The payphone outside the station ate 2 quarters before connecting. Mac's CB channel hissed. "Any eastbound haulers got eyes on a white panel van. License." "Mac, it's Ethan. From the truck stop." Silence. Then, "You shouldn't call here." "What did you see when you pulled me up?" "A cigarette being lit. Thought it was a damn bear at first. All black and shifting. Then I saw the faces. Faces. In the whatever it was. Like they were pressed against glass." Mac exhaled sharply. "Recognized one. My kid brother. Went missing near Amarillo 09. The line died. Autumn deepened. Maple Creek High hosted bonfires where teens kissed with stolen beer courage. Ethan got a day shift at the library, reshelving books that left paper cuts on his fingers. He avoided the mystery section. Mrs. Donovan stopped power walking. Ethan saw her sometimes at dusk, standing perfectly still in her windbreaker, Reggie motionless at her side. They'd watched the sunset until streetlights buzzed on, then vanish. On Halloween, children swarmed the streets, dressed as ghosts and superheroes. Ethan handed out Snickers from a bulk bag, flinching at every ding-dong. At 3:33 a.m., he awoke to his phone ringing. The caller ID showed 10 letters. Quick Stop Emma. Before he yanked the cord from the wall, winter came early. First frost etched the library windows as Ethan alphabetized travel guides. A patron left a newspaper open to page 7. Local trucker found dead in cab. Foul play suspected. Mac's rig photo showed a blurry figure in the passenger seat, face obscured by glare. The microfilm room swallowed him whole. Ethan scrolled through decades of Maple Creek Gazette until his eyes burned. 1978. Night watchman disappears from downtown Texaco. 1992, 2 teens vanish after late-night shift at diner. 2009, highway depth, worker goes missing during storm drain repairs. Each article featured a photo. Each photo contained a blur, a shadow too long, a reflection too still. The library lights flickered. Ethan looked up to find Mrs. Donovan's glasses perched on the microfilm reader. One lens still cracked. He ran until his lungs burned. The old quick-stop lot lay fallow, chain-link fence crowned with barbed wire. Snow dusted the rubble, except for one patch, a perfect circle of bare asphalt where the register had stood. Ethan approached, breath blooming. Something glinted. The coffee pot shard from his final strike, edges frosted with ice. As he crouched, his reflection wavered. Not his face, but 100 faces. Mac's brother, the night watchman. Mrs. Donovan's husband, whose wedding ring now weighed Ethan's pocket. All mouthing the same word. Clock in. Footsteps crunched behind him. Reggie's tags jingled. Ethan stood, turning slowly. The dog sat at attention, leash trailing into the hand of a figure backlit by moon glow. The neon windbreaker didn't so much reflect light as absorb it, darker than any natural color. Third shift's always the hardest, said Ethan's own voice, though his lips never moved. The new hire smiled, name tag glinting. Trainee. Snow began in earnest as Ethan walked toward the ruins, the coffee pot shard warm in his grip. Behind him, the town's clocks struck midnight, and struck, and struck.